So we'll talk about equations and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we ready? You ready on this ride? So the goal is to get to 1.5, 1.6. So in this video, we're going to cover everything relating to the topic of equations, how to solve equations, what are the prerequisites for solving equations. I have some of the examples here that I'll use. This is from our math course, Inspirational Mathematics 2, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2. So in order to solve equations, so today's topic is solving equations. We're going to do everything relating to solving equations. Every math topic, in a sense, has prerequisites. So what are the prerequisites to solving equations? Well, you need to know how to work with integers. You need to know how to work with order of operations. You need to know how to work with, distributive property. And you need to know, ideally, you should have mastered fractions at this point. And so I'm not going to go into detail on that. That's in our Inspirational Mathematics 1 course. But here's a couple of things to keep in mind. When you divide a number, or actually let's start with multiplying negative numbers. When you multiply them together, you get a positive. When you multiply a negative and a positive, you get a negative. When you multiply a positive and a negative, you get a negative. And then, of course, a positive times a positive is a positive. These rules are going to govern the work that we do. So let's just finish some of our prerequisites right here. So those are the rules for integers. When you're multiplying or dividing negative numbers, this is how it works. That's what you get. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is when you have something, when you have a number, it has its opposite, right? Or if we say what is 2 plus negative 2, we know that's 0. Right? So there's something called the properties of real numbers, which are covered in our book, Tools for Master Mathematics, which you guys can access on our website, or you can email me if you want a copy. And when you go to Tools for Master Mathematics, there's a section where we focus on this on page 27, the additive identity, the inverse property, and all of that. That's very important for people to know in order to do equations well. So I would argue that properties of real numbers is one of the topics you need. And I'll explain why this is important. So when you do math, think about it like you're building a house. So right now we're going to work on equations. But in order to do equations, you need to have a solid base in pre-algebra, right? So in order to do this topic well, you need to check the foundation. What is your understanding of the foundation before you build on top of it with a new topic like equations? We need to know how integers work. This is covered in chapter 2 in our first book. So again, I'm not going to go into detail today on that, but it's in chapter 2 of Inspirational Mathematics 1, which is our pre-algebra course. You need to understand order of operations, which is also covered in chapter 1 of our pre-algebra course. You need to know the distributive property, which we can talk about a little bit now. And then you need to know the properties of real numbers, which are on page 27 of our Tools for Mastering Mathematics book. We're hoping to make this book into a video series. It's a book that goes over all the fundamental pieces to being good at mathematics. Okay, so assuming that you have the prerequisites ready and you're ready to do equations, the first thing with equations, again, is one-step equations. Y plus 5 is equal to 10. We subtract 5 from both sides, right? Because whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right. Why are we doing it on the left side? Because we're trying to get rid of 5, right? So y is equal to 5, right? So that's number one. Is if you're solving one-step equations, you use the opposite operation of the thing you're trying to get rid of. So if this was 5y is equal to 25, you divide both sides by 5. And the reason why you're doing that is because you're trying to get rid of 5 on the left side, but if you divide by 5 on the left side, you have to divide by 5 on the right side, so y is equal to 5 as well here. So one-step equations again, and if we understand the properties of real numbers, right? See, this is where math is such that you have to understand the foundation before you build. And that's why some kids struggle with algebra, is because we haven't given them a solid base in pre-algebra. And even within pre-algebra, you need a solid base in multiplication, a solid base in prime factorization, right? The most important topic probably in all of a lot of pre-algebra is prime factorization, because it helps you know how to find the lowest common denominator, which helps you to add fractions. Okay, back to our topic here. One-step equations, you add or you subtract or you multiply or divide depending on what the relationship between the variable is and the thing, right? So like the variable here and this number, what's their relationship? Addition. So we subtracted 5 from both sides. The variable and the number here, what's their relationship? Multiplication. So we divided both sides by 5. Okay, now if we have 2 into x plus 5 is equal to 10, in this case, you need to distribute the 2 into the problem. It becomes 2x plus 10 is equal to 10. So we've distributed, right? This is no longer a one-step equation. This is more a multi-step equation. The first step, though, was we distributed the 2 into both items, and then we got 2x plus 10 is equal to 10. You subtract 10 from both sides. You get 2x is equal to 0. You divide both sides by 2. You get x is equal to 0. Okay? That's a multi-step equation problem. We have a lot of those in our book that you can work on. Multi-step equations, again, very important. Let's turn our attention to one more multi-step equation, and then we'll go from there. So, and actually for this multi-step equation, I'm going to use one with a fraction, just to give us something a little more interesting. So, you have 3 over 2, let's see, into 7 over 3, n plus 1 is equal to 3 over 2. Okay, so let's just go with this first part here. Okay, let's say you have to distribute. You could technically, in this case, actually multiply both sides by 2 over 3. But let's just do this for a second. Now you have 3 over 2 times 7 over 3 n plus 3 over 2 is equal to 3 over 2, okay? And then, so we distributed that in to both. We have 21n over 6 plus 3 over 2 is equal to 3 over 2. Now, you technically could subtract both sides by, 3 over 2 from both sides. You could do that. But here's what I want us to highlight from this problem, though. The denominator is 6 and 2 and 2. Whenever you have a problem involving equations with fractions, I highly recommend multiplying every term by the lowest common denominator. The reason why you do that is to get rid of the denominator, right? So if you multiply this side by 6, you multiply this by 6, you multiply this by 6. If you do that, then it clears the denominator, okay? I'm going the long way with this problem, but I'm trying to teach a skill. And so in this first one, the 6's go away, so you have 21n. In the second one, this becomes 3, so that becomes 9. And in the third one, this becomes 3, and that becomes 9. You subtract 9 from both sides, you get 21n is equal to 0. And then you divide both sides by 21, and n is equal to 0. We can check our work back up here and put a 0 in. If you put a 0 in for n, notice that you actually get this becoming 0, and it becomes 3n is equal, 3 over 2 is equal to 3 over 2. So that's true. This checks out, okay? This is a multi-step equation involving a fraction. Now let's turn our attention to 1.5 and 1.6. More so 1.6 is where I want to stop. But if someone comes to us and says E is equal to mc squared, okay, very famous equation in physics, and they tell us to solve for m, what we do is we divide both sides by c squared. So then m is equal to E over c squared, okay? So that's how we would solve that problem. We solve equations with letters the same way we would solve equations with numbers. We use the same principles. You divide both sides by the thing you're trying to get rid of, or you add the thing that you don't need, and so on and so forth. So then lastly, we have this problem, which is if the absolute value of x is equal to 8, then the absolute value of x is equal to 8, and then we basically do x is equal to 8, or x is equal to negative 8, right? So we basically divide, we basically write one as a positive and one as a negative. That's part of how these numbers work with absolute value. So that's the beginning of our absolute value problems. You always isolate this part. You always need that part by itself. You always need this part by itself. because once you have that part by itself, you just give us a positive of this and a negative of this. That's just the way absolute value equations work. So if somebody comes to us and says, what is 3k plus 8? Absolute value of that is equal to 2. That means it's already isolated for us. We're happy. We just say 3k plus 8 is equal to 2, and 3k plus 8 is equal to negative 2. So basically, you're going to solve two equations. Same thing, that's what we need to do there. We have 4 into r plus 7 is equal to, let's see, 4 into r plus 7 plus 3 is equal to 59. Okay? In this case, we don't have this by itself. So think of it like you're solving for the absolute value. So you subtract 3 from both sides, right? And the thing about solving equations is it's the opposite of PEMDAS, because you have to actually do the addition and subtraction first before you do the multiplication and division. So instead of PEMDAS, I call it SADMEP. It's the other way around. So here what you do is you've subtracted 3 from both sides. So you have r plus 7 is equal to 56. And then you divide both sides by 4, because you're trying to isolate the r plus 7 part. So this 4 cancels that 4. 4 goes into that. We have 1. Let's see, sorry, 1 second. Let me write this down. You have r plus 7. And then here we have 14. Okay, so 4 has gone into 56 14 times. R plus 7. Now we split it into two problems. R plus 7 is 14. R plus 7 is equal to minus 14. R is equal to 7 in this case, because you subtract 7 from both sides. And in this case, you subtract 7 from both sides as well. And R is equal to negative 21. This is absolute value equations. You have to make sure that you split it in two, and then you can solve the problem. We'll discuss more later. Thanks for going through all of the equations details. We'll be back soon.